Every year, Apple releases two sets of brand new phones, the regular iPhone series and the Pro iPhone series. And while you may look at the Pro series of iPhones as just better versions of the regular 15 series, that isn't entirely the answer this year because these phones were made for two very different sets of audiences, and specs don't tell the whole story in real-world differences because I was pretty shocked once I started using and testing these phones. Kind of like how shocked I was how good this pink wallpaper looks on the new pink iPhone 15, and honestly, all the wallpapers from our new wallpaper pack look pretty good on either the 15 or the 15 Pro. So if you want to get one of these wallpapers, you're always asking me where can I get these wallpapers, check out the link in the description below. Also, don't forget, I am giving away an iPhone 15 Pro. All you have to do to enter this contest is subscribe to the channel and then leave a comment down below letting me know why you want an iPhone 15 Pro, or just use the hashtag Greg's Gadgets Giveaway. Again, gonna announce the winner in about a week. And if you want the official rules, make sure you read the description so you know everything and you don't get fooled. Now for this video, I really want to focus on key areas that I think most consumers will notice, like the design, the display, the connectivity, the performance, the camera, battery life, and of course pricing. Now on paper, both the iPhone 15 and iPhone 15 Pro can be had in two different flavors, a 6.1-inch display size phone and a bigger 6.7-inch display size phones. Both iPhones also feature a new curved design that fits better in your hands, and both are adorned with the new dynamic island design. Both even have a USB-C port. So what is the real difference here that most people are going to notice? Well, don't be fooled. There's quite a number of differences here that add up to a stark difference, both good and bad. For starters, the iPhone 15 is adorned with aluminum rails on the side, while the iPhone 15 Pro comes in titanium. This gives a more polished and premium look to the iPhone 15 Pro, but that might be where the advantages end. Now, while both the aluminum and titanium metals feel grippier than the iPhone 14 Pro stainless steel sides, and the titanium shaves weight off the stainless steel design, it really still can't compare to how lightweight the aluminum body is on the iPhone 15, with the 15 and 15 Plus being around 10% lighter than the Pro series. Now that weight difference might not sound like a lot, but that 10% lighter figure is actually the same weight reduction jump that the 14 Pro was to the 15 Pro, which resulted in a phone that was much more comfortable to hold. So when you look at the regular 15, that's 20% lighter than the old 14 Pro series, so you're getting a much more comfortable phone in the hand. Of course, that may be where the iPhone 15 design advantages disappear, because the iPhone 15 receives a narrow bezel around the display, resulting in this really thin black border that when you're using like a darker wallpaper, it's almost hard to see a border at all. Like it's almost like this phone has zero bezels. And that actually means the dimensions on the 15 Pro and 15 Pro Max are even slightly smaller than the regular 15 and 15 Plus, despite having the same screen sizes. And I gotta say, even though it is a very small difference, when I'm holding the 15 Pro Max this year, I notice it. I'm just like, this phone feels a little bit more manageable this year, and I really love the design on this phone. Now, the displays themselves match up pretty well in quality. Both phones get OLED displays at 460 pixels per inch. Both phones have the same contrast ratio, and both phones, for the first time, each even have the same brightness levels at 1600 nits of peak brightness when watching HDR video and 2000 nits of brightness when in outdoor use. And make no mistake, this is the closest display quality has ever been on a normal iPhone series compared to the Pro models. But there is a big catch here, and that is the refresh rate. While both phones look the same and have the same quality, the regular models are still stuck at a 60 Hz display, while the Pro models get a variable refresh rate display that can range its refresh rate all the way down from 1 Hz to 120 Hz, double the refresh rate of the normal 15. In real-world use, this means that the 15 Pro's display will appear smoother when scrolling or playing back animations, and certain games can even take advantage of this faster refresh rate for smoother performance and gameplay, which might even give you like a slight edge in your own gaming performance. In a real-world test, the faster refresh rate may or may not be hugely noticeable to you though. For most users, I think if you're not used to using a 120 Hz display, the changes aren't apparent unless you have both phones side by side. Our brains are kind of just pretty good at adapting and making sure whatever display you're currently using feels and looks like normal. I say this as someone that switches back and forth between a 60 Hz studio display and a 120 Hz display on his iPhone daily, and even switching between these phones, after about 10 minutes, it's kind of hard to even realize that I'm using a 60 Hz display. And the more real-world advantage that the 15 Pro has is its ability to lower that display down to 1 Hz so you can get an always-on display so you can see your lock screen, your time, your lock screen widgets, live activities, and the always-on display even gets an enhancement with iOS 17 with the new standby mode, letting you turn your iPhone into a smart display. And while this does work on the regular 15, the screen does have to turn off after some inactivity, whereas the 15 Pro display can continually stay on the entire time because of the always-on display. Of course, another design difference, which is obvious, is the new action button on the iPhone 15 Pro. You can actually map this to some cool quick commands. I have mine mapped to opening the camera. And then on the iPhone 15, you don't really get that functionality because it still just comes with the standard mute switch, which we know and love. Of course, chips are another big difference in the regular 15 series versus the Pro series. And while the iPhone 15 Pro phones get the latest A17 Pro chip, the regular 15s get the same A16 chip that was found on last year's 14 Pro Max. Fear not though, because in real-world testing, this isn't going to make a noticeable difference when opening apps, scrolling through the user interface, checking Twitter, browsing Instagram, or any of the daily things we do on our smartphones. The A16 is still a stupidly powerful chip. It can handle a lot, and it will be supported for a long time with software updates. However, that doesn't mean that the A17 Pro here isn't packing a little extra, right? And it does make a real-world difference. Most notably, you'll find faster export performance in video editing and photo editing apps, but I think the biggest reason why you might want to go for the A17 Pro chip on the 15 Pro is because of exclusive console-level gaming like Resident Evil 4 Remake and Assassin's Creed Mirage, which are launching exclusively on the iPhone 15 Pro this year. Like, the A17 Pro is powerful enough supposedly to play those console games, and they won't be available on the normal 15, which I think is a kind of strange strategy from Apple, right? I don't remember Apple ever launching like exclusive software. I mean, Apple's technically not making it, right? But exclusive game software is coming to the 15 Pro, and it just won't be playable on the 15 or older phones. So if you're a gamer, that A17 Pro chip might actually make a real-world difference this year. But those games might or might not matter to you, especially if all you want is a bigger battery so you can spend more time mindlessly scrolling through TikTok. Yeah, Dave, I'm talking to you. Get your act together. You waste too much time on that app. Now, while you might think the Pro phones, bigger, better Pro equals bigger battery, that's just not the case, and it hasn't been for the past 2 years. Now with both the regular 15 and Plus having bigger batteries than the 15 Pro and Pro Max. This surprised me as well, considering the regular 15 beat out the 15 Pro and the 15 Pro Max beat out the 15 Plus in Mr. Who's the Boss's battery test this year, making them the iPhones of choice for better battery life, especially that 15 Plus model, which currently has the best iPhone battery life of all time. And if you're watching this right now, don't leave just yet, because we haven't even gotten to the good part, and that is the camera systems in these phones are, without a doubt, in my mind, the most impressive camera systems we have ever seen from Apple yet. Both the iPhone 15 and 15 Pro get the same 48 megapixel sensor on the main camera lens, and they have numerous advantages over Apple's previous attempts at this same sensor size from last year. Both cameras now take, by default, 24 megapixel photos instead of binning them down to 12 megapixels, essentially doubling the resolution of last year's phones, and this results in much more detail for the standard photos than even the 14 Pro was capable of just a year ago. Here's a side-by-side shot between the 15, the 15 Pro, and the 14 Pro, and you can notice immediately as you crop in just how much more detail is stored on the 15 and 15 Pro camera system, and I mean, if you really crop in and zoom, the results are outstanding for a year-over-year difference. There is so much more detail in the default photos on the 15 models. Now, even though the main upgrades come over to both the 15 and the 15 Pro camera system, there are still some differences between both of these main camera systems, and that is that the main lens on the 15 has a 26mm focal length, while on the 15 Pro it has a 24mm focal length, which does give you slightly wider points of view from the shot. And then the 15 Pro can actually change the focal distance on its main lens using the 48 megapixel sensor to kind of crop in, but still retain detail enough to get you a 24 megapixel photo. So you can have a 24mm point of view, a 28mm point of view, and then a 35mm point of view. But besides that, the shots taken in this default photo mode look pretty much exactly the same, and that is very good for the normal iPhone 15 model. This is also the first time the normal iPhone gets any kind of extended zoom functionality thanks to Apple's big 48 megapixel sensor. They are able to crop into that sensor to reproduce a shot at 2x without losing detail, and you can even zoom to 10x, unlike the iPhone 14 camera system, which just had digital zoom up to 5x. Of course, you probably know the Pro phones have a dedicated zoom lens, but what might surprise you is how little the difference is between the 6.1-inch size iPhones. That's because the 6.1-inch Pro retains its 3x lens, unlike the bigger Pro Max, which exclusively gets the 120mm 5x lens. On the Pro Max, the 5x shots are really good, and that extra zoom range really does feel drastically different as a lens compared to the old 3x. You are able to get much closer to your subjects and also just frame shots with a different focal point with that 120mm lens, which just makes it a really good lens for flattering portraits. Not that you'll see any samples of that with my awkward, anxiety-ridden posture and poses, but I try to make myself look beautiful when I can. But if you're not a Max or Plus size fan, you may not need to worry as much, as I found the digital zoom from the 2x mode on the regular 15 held up really well against the 3x on the 15 Pro, and there may be a slight difference, but it really isn't that drastic. Another slight difference is with the ultra-wide camera on the 15. It doesn't have autofocus, so in normal shots you won't really notice this, but if you get up close and try and take like a really close-up shot, the 15 Pro has a macro mode, and you could just get really close distance, while on the 15 it just isn't possible. But don't be fooled. In a lot of ways, minus that telephoto lens and that macro mode, these camera systems are pretty much exactly the same, except for one last difference, and that is philosophy. You see, Apple made some interesting decisions here with the regular 15, and for better or for worse, they decided not to include any of the Pro camera modes that the 15 Pro has. So there's no Apple Pro RAW, which lets you capture a full resolution 48 megapixel photo from the camera sensor with no compression, or no ProRes video option here, which gives you less compressed video footage and lets the user get more control over how the footage looks during post-processing editing. In fact, Apple made an entirely new mode for the iPhone 15 called HEIF Max, which does let you utilize the full 48 megapixel sensor to take a 48 megapixel photo, but it still does compress the photo to a smaller 5 megabyte file instead of the 70 megabyte files you can get from Apple's Pro RAW mode. Again, you would have the same resolution from those photos, but if you go into an editing app, technically you'll get more control over how those photos look with Apple's Pro RAW mode found on the 15 Pro. In fact, the 15 Pro is even more flexible because it can take those Apple Pro RAW photos and also the HEIF Max photos, letting you decide ultimately how you want to take photos. And there's no reason why the normal 15 shouldn't be capable of doing this, right? It has an A16 chip, and the 14 Pro last year had these same Pro photo and video features. So it really does all come down to philosophy, and it seems like Apple is just thinking that normal users don't want a complex photo experience. You see, to take full advantage of these Pro photo and video modes, again, you do have to use an external editor, and you need a lot of storage for something like ProRes video to be viable on a phone. And I assume Apple is mostly not including these features to normal users so they don't get confused, and so they can make a more controlled approach to the regular iPhone 15, and then also give the iPhone 15 Pro users even more freedom and flexibility deciding how they want their photos and videos to look. It might also be why Apple chose to include a slower USB-C port on the regular 15 models, which only gets 480 megabits per second. And yeah, I guess that makes sense too. Average users rarely plug in their phones to transfer data, especially not large sets of data at a time, where Pro users do, right? They can take advantage of the faster 10 gigabit per second port on the 15 Pro, and they can offload files much faster, and they're gonna need that if they're shooting things like ProRes video, which takes up a massive amount of storage on the device. And we didn't even go over pricing, right? The iPhone 15 is a good value. It's $800, whereas last year, the regular iPhone 14 was a bad deal at $800. This year, I wouldn't pick up a 13 or a 14 if I'm shopping for a new phone. The 15 has enough new features, a new design, and a great camera system that makes it such a great value at its price point. And in real-world differences, there's actually very little sacrifices going for the iPhone 15 over the 15 Pro. There are niche use cases that do make this phone, the Pro phone, better, but again, you have to be one of those users who's going to utilize it, and as a normal user, for the mainstream audience, you're probably not going to utilize a lot of features like ProRes video. The iPhone 15 Plus especially looks like a good deal this year because not only does it have the longest battery life in an iPhone, which was true with last year with the 14 Plus, but the price difference this year is even more drastic between the Plus and the Pro Max with a $300 price difference, which at $900 last year was a little bit awkward in the lineup, but I think now that the price has been kind of extended on the base model Pro Max, it makes the regular Plus look like a better value. And while the 15s are good values, it doesn't mean you shouldn't buy the Pros. The Pros do have more features that, and I hate to say it, but I'm gonna make it simple, has more features that Pro users will value. So they're gonna care more about the premium design. They're gonna care more about the camera zoom. They're gonna care about the camera modes, the faster refresh rate displays, a promise of being able to play AAA level console games in a faster USB-C port. These are more niche use cases, but if you're watching my video and you feel like you can benefit from any of those use cases, then this is absolutely the iPhone you should get, even though the regular i15 is such a good value this year. And yes, there's no clear winner here because different users will have different needs, but this isn't a year where the Pro phones are de facto the best phones. There are advantages and disadvantages to each specific model. But the most important thing you need to know is that each phone has a valid reason to be in the lineup this year, and I think you'll be happy with anyone you pick. The lineup is extremely good this year. All right, hopefully this video helped you out if you were deciding between any of the iPhone models this year. If it did, please leave me a like. If you want to see more from the channel, make sure you're subscribed. Don't forget, you still have a little bit of extra time to enter that iPhone 15 Pro giveaway, so make sure you subscribe to the channel. I just said that, so you're getting double subscribe energy here. All right, thanks again for watching. I'll see you in the next one.